Last night, Donald Trump was talking to congressional Republicans at his Doral golf course in Florida. And he again brought up the idea of a third term. And he said something about talking to Mike Johnson if he'd even be allowed to run for a third term. And he talked about how much money he's already raised for another campaign. Well, he's not allowed to run for a third term, but this isn't the first time he's brought it up. He mentioned it right after getting elected. He mentioned it the other day about him getting a third or even a fourth term. Now, Donald Trump at the end of his term would be 82 years old. He doesn't believe he's 82 years old. I remember when he was in court for a deposition, they asked him his age. I think he was 77 at the time. He couldn't say 77. He said 77 because he didn't want to admit that he was actually that old. And of course, he thinks he's going to live forever and be just fine and just competent. But Donald Trump kept raging about how 82 years old for Joe Biden was going to be too old to run. Well, he'll be 82 when he's out of office. So that's another whole can of worms. But Donald Trump is not eligible to run again for a third term unless they change the Constitution. And that's just it. No matter who he asks or whatever, that's the answer he's going to get. Now, Representative Andy Ogles of Tennessee did introduce that bill into Congress that would start the amendment process, but it's so blatantly biased toward Donald Trump. I don't see it getting through this Congress with the numbers they need. They would need like 290 to 300 members of the House and 67 senators to pass it. Don't see it happening. And 38 states to pass it. Also don't see that happening. But this third term amendment would say, well, if you're elected to one term, get voted out, and then get voted back in for a second term, you could run for a second consecutive term. But you couldn't run for a third term if you got two consecutive terms right off the bat. So basically, it would only apply to Donald Trump because we've only ever had one other president that was elected to non-consecutive terms, and that was Grover Cleveland. So this is just ridiculous. Donald Trump is just musing about it because he doesn't want to give up the power. He doesn't want to admit that he's going to be out of office someday. And some of the Republicans are kowtowing and bowing to him. Just because he says he's musing about it or he asks about it, don't get swept up in the idea that it's going to happen. He can't change the Constitution to make it happen. There's just not the votes there. And even if they somehow got it through Congress, they wouldn't necessarily get it through all the states, and it takes a long time to pass a constitutional amendment. The 27th Amendment on congressional pay took 200 years to ratify. The 28th Amendment that may or may not be ratified is the Equal Rights Amendment, and that they were working on for 50. So even if it would get through Congress, there's no guarantee it would be ratified in time for Donald Trump to run for a third term. He's just talking out of his ass.